Okay. Welcome everyone to the third-ish kind of episode of my all tanks 0 to Keystone Hero challenge. I say third-ish because it's not a new week yet, and this is kind of an extra episode. In episode 2 we focus on catching up with the monk and the death knight, and now we'll look into what I've been up to with my warrior, paladin and demon hunter during that same week. But first, an important update. Last episode I asked you guys for your thoughts on maybe changing the format of this challenge a little bit, with the central idea being that if I focus on less tanks all at the same time, I'll be able to use this extra time to give you proper in-depth content. And a solid amount of you guys responded. I also put up a poll, and this also showed me a very clear answer.
I love democracy.
So this is what we'll do. I'll put the focus on 1 or maybe 2 tanks. I'll play around with it a little bit to see how much time it all takes. And I'll also do a weekly key on all of the others, so I don't miss any vault opportunities. I think this is a nice middle ground where we still get weekly updates on all the tanks, and the main 1 or 2 will see bigger jumps forward on a weekly basis. Now in regards to what tanks I'll put my main focus on, I can already say now that my focus will be on the Death Knight, and then maybe the Warrior as a second tank. Simply put, I like them the most, they intrigue me. Now with all of that said, let's look at what our current main cast has been up to, shall we? Let's talk about the Paladin. So the first run for my Paladin this week immediately starts out as one of the most fantastic beginnings of a dungeon I've ever come across, in my opinion. It's my own key, it's a plus 12 freehold, which I got from my vault, and we immediately notice that the health bars of our party members and my own are not quite the most stable, are they? The healer also immediately goes down, and the entire pool just feels off. I have to commit my lay on hands to make sure I stay alive, and then I try to get the second pool together, which usually, especially in pugs, you want to LOS behind this little wall bit. And then we notice that there's been a ninja pool and an extra pack with an enforcer and everything got pulled, so it's like an insta reset. Everyone dies, and we try again. And then we found ourselves in the awkward situation where one of the Corsairs was in a freeze trap. I've never been in this situation, so I probably should have just waited until the trap expired and the mob to reset, but I was like, okay, well if it's there I might as well try and attack him. But then I moved too far forwards and I pulled the pack to the right, and then the pack to the left suddenly also got in combat with us. I don't quite know exactly what happened. Needless to say, another reset. Now, this is something I only noticed by looking at the recording. I didn't see this chat message while the run was going on, but the mage lets the healer know, and I guess lets the party know, healer, you have sickness. The healer actually genuinely has resurrection sickness. If you roll the clip back, then you can see that they have a very limited amount of health, and their abilities are just not doing anything. So the first pull felt completely off because no one was receiving any heals, because the healer just genuinely wasn't capable of healing. But this resurrection sickness lasted until the second attempt of the first boss. So right before we actually engage the boss properly, the resurrection sickness falls off, because all of a sudden we see that his health goes from like 100k to 500k, so rejoice! We have a healer. And from there on forwards, the run actually stabilizes for a little bit. We had 1 death on Council of Captains, which was very low impact. It was an instant battle res and everything was fine. But then I make kind of an awkward mistake. I know that we have a resto druid in our party, and I've done freehold before with resto druids. They use their swarm, and the swarm actually prioritizes the target dummies on the right side. And if a swarm goes there, it will actually pull the 2 mobs. So I want to try and prevent them from immediately going to my healer and killing them. So I tried to immediately pass through the crusher to try and actually pull them, but he hits me in the back really hard. I just failed to properly handle the situation that I'm in at that moment, and then I die, and the rest of the party eventually also dies. But we tried it again. This time it does work out. One more inconsequential death later, we killed our good friend Ludwig. We're waiting for the RP so we can engage Trothak. And we want to do a pull in between, right? Now, the pull that I want to do is a patrol, and the patrol happened to be under the bridge. And everything everything above us got pulled, so that was another wipe. We're not really doing too well here, but, you know, timer is still looking fine, all things considered. In fact, from here on forwards, we actually got our act together, and no one died. We ended up timing the key. It was only a +1. With 26 deaths, we still had 3 minutes and a half, so it was never actually to the wire, if that makes sense. But for a +12 freehold, this was not the best showing. Nevertheless, we made it. And I also got a piece of loot. I got myself some better legs. I was given a +13 under-up, and that's going to be the next run. Now, in this beginning section, we managed to eventually pull both sets of ticks and both patrols. Now, to be fair, the reason the other patrol got pulled was because of Incorporeal, which pulls mobs in proximity. It's very cringe, to be honest, because you can't really manage where they spawn. So, you know, that's not really anyone's fault. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. Once we're at the first boss, both the Demon Hunter as well as the Dragon take the frontal like a champ, but we do eventually get through the fight. Aside from one death to one of the Bloodswarmers, the trash in the Kragmaw room was pretty chill, and then we ended up fighting the boss itself. Demon Hunter didn't dodge the charge, but it wasn't too big of a deal. We ended up getting the boss down. We weren't overwhelmed by ticks despite being one man down, so that's really good. I take a frontal to the face here, which makes it so that I'm feared, and then right at that moment the horror casts Dark Echoes. I had my stun available, so I would have been able to stop him if I wasn't feared, so that death is absolutely on me. I'm sorry, Mr. Dragon. DK dies to a tentacle, but eventually we find our way to the Unbound Abomination. And despite some scuff, we actually only end up missing out on a +2 by 10 seconds, which I'll take it, you know. It is what it is. It wasn't a clean run, but we got there, and there was never really a worry of, oh no, are we gonna time it or not? We got there. We're fine. We're chilling. We're vibing. The key that was bestowed upon me is a +14 Uldaman. So let's go. Now, the first funny thing that happens is I've been doing so many low keys on multiple characters at this point. This is actually the first 14. And this is also the first instance of Sanguine as an affix. I completely forgot about it, so these mobs stood in Sanguine for a solid while before my mind suddenly goes like, oh, whoops. And then I try and manage it, but obviously Uldaman is not really the best place, the easiest place to manage Sanguine anyway. But it completely slipped my mind, so I had to kind of mental reset there. In this pool, I actually end up going down, and ultimately I think the reason is very simple. I'm very stubbornly holding on to Sentinel because I thought I would want to use it for the next pool. I should have just sent it so that I wouldn't have died, so that the pool wouldn't have been dragged out even further. Unlucky. Learning moment. After that, we kind of slowly but surely make our way through the beginning parts of this dungeon. After the Sentinel boss, I go into the next trash pool, and I once again completely forget about Sanguine. So yeah, who's the Sanguine guy? You should hit him up. He's a very good healer, as you can see. The mob management in this pool wasn't the best on my end. I end up killing the Warlock with a cleave, I believe, right here. And then from there on forwards, it's kind of a constant dance, because not only do you want to make sure you don't cleave your party, you also want to make sure that Sanguine drops properly, which once again wasn't really managed all too well in this key in general, to be honest. And then we get to this pull with the Runic Protector. Now, the warrior gets cursed and dies. I don't really remember if we had proper kicks or dispels on it to stop it. Nevertheless, though, the big issue is that all of a sudden, this pack on the right side gets pulled, and, you know, as soon as that happens, we have 2 Runic Protectors and a bunch of Hail of Stones as well. It's a full team wipe at that point. Now, I've tried looking back at this recording multiple times. even on slower speeds, and I cannot see what actually pulled this pack. I don't believe it's just proximity, because I've tanked this pack countless times on my main in this side of the room, and it never caused any issues. So I don't really know what happened here. If anyone does, please let me know, because I would be very interested in looking into it. But nevertheless, full team wipe, so we go again. Now we do generally clean up our act from here on forwards. It's a slow and steady push to the end of the dungeon, essentially. I got a bit frustrated right here at this section because we were good on count, and it's a very normal, or at least it should be a very normal and well-known skip at this point, to just jump from this little bench to the upper side of this wall. But somehow these two time reavers did get pulled anyway, so we had to kill both of them, and that made it so that the timer, which was initially pretty chill still, suddenly became a whole lot more tight. Luckily, it is fortified, so we do end up killing the boss reasonably quickly. We still have a minute on the timer left, so, you know, close, but not too close. And I get a nice piece of loot. Instead of veteran gloves, I now have champion gloves, which is really nice. My key turned into a 15 vortex pinnacle, and that is the last key that I've done on my paladin for this week. Now, I'd love to show you this key, but I forgot to record it. Now, however, as soon as the key was finished, I realized that the best thing I thought to do was to screenshot the M+ timer. As you can see, it was a close key. It was kind of a scuffed key for sure. Very, you know, tight, all things considered, but we did end up timing it. It also gave me a solid amount of score. So ultimately, very happy with the progress that I've made on this paladin. We'll look at his entire journey in terms of gear upgrades and the vault as well at the end of the episode. And this then brings us to our next tank, which is the warrior. Now, as we make our way through the beginning of this +9 Neltheris, which was the key that I've received from my vault, let's briefly talk about Warrior. I actually really like it, and the main reason as to why that is because to me, it feels like you just always have buttons to press. Avatar is pretty much up for every pull. Shield charge, same thing. It's very easy and very manageable mitigation with just shield block, which is tons of physical damage mitigation. Building up those absorb shields with ignore pain is also very fun, and in general everything just kind of feels smooth. And obviously spell reflection in some dungeons, it is insane, because not only, you know, do you have a solid bit of magic mitigation, you also have an insane amount of reflected damage. Now this run went without any hitch up until Forge Master. I tried getting the pull together of two trash packs before you generally engage him, and the boss actually got pulled. Now, I think it is because of Incorporeal, which, you know, is very annoying. But it is what it is. We try and manage it, but then at some point, with the next set of Incorporeal, we fail to properly CC them, and then the destabilize goes off, and then from there on forwards, everything just kind of snowballs out of our control. It's a full team wipe, so we have to walk all the way back to him and then try this section of the dungeon again. Now, if that didn't happen, I'm fairly certain we would have +3'd this key, because aside from that little mess up at the Forge Master boss, the entire run was really smooth. I didn't get any loot, sadly, but I did get an upgraded key, which is an Underrot +11. I've been going to Underrot a lot. And it's been a wild ride most of the time, so we'll see how this one goes. And actually, the ticks didn't get pulled in the beginning. In fact, the entire first section of the dungeon went without any kind of an issue. We had a death here and there on Cragmaw Trash, but overall, we were able to pull him at a very chill and reasonable time. However, after the first tantrum, we fell behind on ticks, and then increasingly more of them started spawning. And then I did a very silly thing, or well, I mean, it's unlucky rather than silly, but I had impending victory, and I was in range, and I jumped backwards out of range, and then right when I wanted to press impending victory to heal, I died. Now, I'm not 100% certain if that actually would have saved me, because there were still ticks up and, you know, they would have still dealt a lot of damage, but nevertheless, I died, and then the rest of the party died, so we had to try Cragmaw again. Now, remember when I said that we didn't pull the ticks? Well, This time we pulled the ticks right in front of the Cragmaw room with the maggot as well. It looks like the shaman wasn't actually hugging the side well enough. He insta-died, and then we had to scrape together this pool that no one wanted and asked for. Now on Cragmaw, there's this bug where the ticks in the beginning of the room sometimes aggro and come at you. Yeah, that happened here. You can see that they all of a sudden just start running into frame. There was no indigestion or charge on that end at any point in the fight, so unlucky. Now I do end up dealing with it, and we do end up beating Cragmaw, so we can actually move on. Now this last pull in front of the third boss is what actually completely destroyed us. It ends up with just me and the healer surviving, and the shaman apparently had enough. He decided to be, you know, a little bit toxic and called the healer out for dealing damage instead of healing. Personally, I didn't feel like the healer did anything wrong in particular. I think the shaman just turned a bit sour and lost his patience, to be fair. Now after the shaman's little outburst and after the pull, everyone was like, what is he doing wrong? And then the healer says, I am sorry, I am very drunk. Which honestly is the best possible response he could have given. I responded with based because I loved it, and obviously I wanted to kind of keep, you know, the team morale going. It's very easy for a team to spiral into like a negative mental if you let people shit on each other, if you will. Now the first bit of this fight went fine, but then people started baiting the wrong way, and at some point the shaman was seemingly at least doing it on purpose, and things got messy because of it. At some point it was kind of a Helm's Deep scenario where we got pushed in a corner, and that is where we made our stand for a little bit of the fight. Then eventually I had to jump out because there was just no room to stand, and then a few people died, and then at the very, very, very end I go down at the exact same moment the last blood visage goes down, and we win the fight in the most weird way possible. But yeah, so we did time the key with 2 minutes to spare. Now I decided to join a +10 halls. Now this hall starts out really good. We have 2 deaths on the pack before the first boss, but they're not really any kind of high impact at all. And the first boss itself also goes really, really well. We make our way to the second boss, and on the pack before the second boss, things suddenly start going weird. So I get stunned by the second stealth mob because my heroic leap didn't end up hitting him. And then some casts go through, people get low, but no one dies. Then people just get chain lightning to death. To the point where eventually the stabilize gets through from the incorporeal being, and then it's just me versus the rest of the pack, and I end up fighting it for probably about a minute, if not more, for the rest to walk back. But we do not wipe on this pull, so we do actually kill it, which is good. Now after that bit of silliness, we just continue on our way through the rest of the dungeon. Second boss is not a problem, but then the last dragon pull, the warrior stands in the circle, it hits him for a lot, and then the lightning cloud thingy on the floor also hits him, so he does die, but this pull still ends up being fine. Then the third boss happens, and this is usually where things can go wrong, and sadly the warrior takes another leading role in this. Not once, but twice. He seems to be very greedy to try and get more DPS in, and it actually ends up costing his life twice because he doesn't get behind the ice block fast enough. Nevertheless, we do get through this boss fight. We don't actually wipe because everyone else did play the mechanic correctly. Now then we get to this big pool in the gauntlet area, if you will. It's not really a gauntlet per se, but let's just call it that. And this is where things go wrong for me. This is a long pool. The pool gets dragged out. At some point we miss a kick on tidal convergence. There's lots of aqualings, and then the combination of the big brown circle that stuns you and deals damage, as well as oceanic breath, makes it so I mess up my positioning. And then I have impending victory up, and I think I would have been fine if I was able to hit it, but I was out of range of the mob that I was targeting, which is really annoying because that makes it so I don't actually hit anything to heal, and then I die, and then the rest also dies. Now after a long walk back, we do end up completing this gauntlet of sorts, and then we get to the last boss, and we have an inconsequential death, but we do end up timing this key. It was a lot closer in the end than I would have wanted to, especially because this is only a 10 halls, but nevertheless we got there. We can move on. Now I decided to join a +10 Brackenhide. This is the last key that I did, and in the beginning everything is pretty much fine. The boomy gets targeted by a claw mangle. No one stopped it. He also didn't really move out of the way, so he ended up dying, but the rest of that first boss trash area went perfectly fine. The boss fight itself, though, we did have a pretty big mess up. I was incapacitated because the totem was up. They DPS'd the totem down, but I didn't get dispelled, so I couldn't actually stand in the big red arrow to prevent our Shadow Priest from dying, he does end up going down. Now, Tree Moth Trash, for the most part, goes okay, at least for the beginning, and then we have 2 deaths because there was a Withering Totem up and it was just accumulating stacks on all of us. I thought we were out of range and I wasn't actually paying too much attention. It was getting a bit late at that point in the day, so I think my brain was starting to turn off a little bit, but I definitely should have either put the pack on the totem or moved away further. And then later on we also had a death due to a necrotic breath going through by one of the wilted oaks. Then the second boss goes fine, there's not any kind of issue. And good news, in between the second and third boss, this time we did not pull any gut stabbers, so I'm very proud of these people. Now the third boss goes fine. Trash in between the third and last boss also, no problem. Last boss itself, no problem, so we +2 the key. I got myself some bracers, which are on the champion track, instead of the ones that I have, which are on the veteran track, so I'll gladly take that upgrade as well, for sure. And that's it for my warrior. I decided to put him on the bench for the rest of the week, and the only tank remaining is the demon hunter. Now the key I got from my vault was a +10 hauls, and that's also the first key I did, and we blasted through this key, honestly. We didn't experience any kind of issues up until the second boss, where 2 people died because they just accumulated stacks of the poison buff, and as you know, as soon as you get to 10 stacks, you pretty much insta-die, which is what happened. And then the second bit of problems was on the second boss, where people didn't, properly stand behind the ice block that protects you and stuff. I ended up proccing my cheat on the pull with the dragon in between the third and the last boss. Simply put, there was a lot of stuff going on. I got pushed by one of the waves. I had a frontal on me. I had the brown circle with the stun that also damages, that was messing with my positioning and stuff. But cheat death is a cooldown that you want to use, right? So regardless, we make it to the last boss. Everything goes fine. We +3 the key. A big ring drops, but I roll for it and I don't get it, which is very unfortunate. But we move on to the next one. The next key is a freehold 13. Unlike the freehold I did on my Paladin, this one actually is very, very clean for the first half of the dungeon. It's only after the Council of Captains I pull a pack while I'm waiting for Ludwig to become active, and then as soon as Ludwig is active, I actually try and engage him. But the group was still kind of walking into the ring, if that makes sense, and our healer actually dies because of it. Now they're able to walk back into the ring, but right when they are back in the ring, I make a funny, interesting discovery. I was, under a bit of threat, and I wanted to create some distance between me and Ludwig and the mobs. So I jumped away with my Infernal Strike, but it turns out that the turtle shells actually have a very high Z-axis, and even though I was, objectively above the shell at all times, it actually still hits me and kills me. A learning moment. It's not something that is very intuitive, but I guess, we take that with us from here on forwards. I eventually do get B-resed, and before that moment, the hunter was able to kite the boss around a bit. Ultimately, everything is fine, and we get through this whole section perfectly fine as well. In this next pool, right before the last boss, I press my hunt button right when the swirlies of the sea spout spawn. And I get hit by them, and then I proc my cheat death, which, was kind of frustrating because it was very poor and unlucky timing. Now this pool becomes even more sketch because at some point I'm just under heavy assault and I don't really immediately have a button to press. I have the reaction to jump away, but then I still walk back into the pool and die. Yeah, I think I should have just kept my distance until something was up, until I was healed to full again as well. That is, I think, something very unique to Demon Hunter, and it's something that I definitely still need to get a solid feel for, if that makes sense. But we are able to get to Harlan Sweet, and we are able to just one-shot him. So all in all, despite, some scuff here and there, this key was pretty successful, and I'm very happy with it. We +2 the key, and this time I get a ring traded to me, which is a massive upgrade because I'm still holding on to Mythic 0 rings at this point. And I decided to immediately check out my new key, which is a Neltharis 15. Now I am aware that I'm doing a 15 with 409 item level, which isn't the most. Nevertheless though, for tanks, the vast majority of your survivability comes from pressing the right buttons at the right time. Item level ultimately is kind of secondary to everything. This key does hurt though, and it is a rough one, and at some point there is a moment where we just kind of chain die, and it all starts when I'm trying to get this pull together for the chains. Now I have a bear brain because I'm a bear main, and this pool, or getting this pool together, is very, very easy and chill on bear. Not so much on demon hunter, I feel. I was constantly under heavy damage, and at some point I press my fell devastation and I expect it to heal me, and my health just keeps going down, and then I fall down. And then that causes the rest of the party to be under attack. And then sadly the hunter doesn't reset the pool by dying himself. He brings it back to us, and then we just always die again and again and again until we suddenly have like 10 deaths. We tried again though, and this time with not as many mobs. And then we succeed, and then we are able to properly progress through the dungeon towards Forge Master. Now we have some deaths on the way to Forge Master, but they're generally very low impact. It's either a battle res or just a wait until the pool is over kind of res. These deaths were mainly linked to people instantly pumping their DPS to the point where I couldn't get aggro anymore, or just standing in frontals and stuff, so it's not really something that I could do much about personally. In the end, we get to the last boss without any further deaths, except for on the last boss right at the end somewhere, because the monk was hit by one of the swirlies during the shield phase. But we time it with 3.5 minutes left, so the key was never actually in danger, despite having 18 deaths. What I have learned though from this run for sure is that there is moments of tankiness and moments of extreme squishiness with Demon Hunter, and I will definitely still need to develop that feel for, okay, now I am solid, I'm good to stay in the pool, uh-oh, now I'm not. I need to maybe back away, or I need to figure out a way to properly handle getting the mobs together while I'm in a state of squishiness, if you will. Now, I was very happy with this plus 15 that I just timed, and I was like, you know what? That's enough. I'm gonna do a chill, nice, calm key to end the week with my Demon Hunter, and I went into a plus 10 under as my very last key. Now, this key was super chill, super fast and efficient. We had one death all the way in the beginning due to a frontal going through, and one death towards the end because someone stood in a tentacle of one of the big corruptor dudes. But we pushed through, and it was all fine and chill and nice, so I was very happy with it. So we've gone through all of the tanks and their journeys throughout the week. That means there is only one thing left for us to look at, which are the weekly vaults. So let's start with the Demon Hunter while we just talked about them. Now, I immediately saw the 441 legs that appeared, and I knew I had heroic legs still. So this is like a 52 item level upgrade, so obviously I immediately picked this one. This brings me close to 114 item level, which is very nice. And I also have a plus 15 Eltharian's Lair as my key for the next week. And next up is our friend the Paladin. And not unlike my Demon Hunter, he also got a massive item level upgrade in a shoulder piece. I was holding on to Mythic 0 shoulders, and I got 434 shoulders on the hero track. So that is amazing, and I'm very happy with it. He's sitting pretty at 418 item level now, which is huge. The key I got was a 15 Eltharis. And then lastly, the Vault of the Warrior. No massive jump in item level for the Warrior, sadly, but funnily enough, I once again get Treemouth's Splinter Trinket, and since the ring in the vault kind of competes with the 2 crafted rings that I have now, which I can further upgrade in item level myself once I have the right items, I end up taking this Splinter, even though I do feel still that it is a massive defensive overkill, especially for the keys that I'm doing. An extra button to press as a cooldown, you know, I'm not gonna complain either, so in this situation, it's the obvious choice. The key of my warrior is now a plus 12 halls. With the new trinket equipped, I am sitting pretty at 417 item level. And that is officially that for this week on all of the tanks. Overall, I'm very happy to just be able to dive into keys as a way of playing the game instead of doing the other things, the initial gearing process after you've leveled, I guess. And yeah, the journey to learn these tanks is still very exciting to me. I'm very happy that I started this whole thing, to be honest. Keep in mind that next week things will be a little bit different. I will mainly be focusing on the Blood Death Knight, and if I have the opportunity to also focus a bit on the Warrior, I'll definitely do so. And the other tanks will just have a weekly key from there on forwards until I reach my goal with one of them, and then I can, you know, slot one in and move one out, if that makes sense. If you enjoy this little journey that I have embarked on, do consider subscribing, do consider pressing that like button. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. I will not hold it against you, no worries. And with all of that said, I will see you guys in the next one. I'm out. Cheers!